Happy New Year and welcome one and all to the Cool Worlds podcast with me, your host, David Kipping. Let me take you back for a moment to 1972. Around this time, NASA decided to launch two missions called Pioneer 10 and 11 that would actually be the first spacecraft ever launched by humanity that, after they completed all of their science goals, would have enough velocity that actually escape the solar system. They would escape the gravitational well of the sun altogether and become, therefore, the first interstellar messengers from humanity into the stars. And so there was an opportunity that Carl Sagan and Frank Drake very much appreciated and realized, and decided to design a plaque on those Pioneer spacecraft called the Pioneer plaques that depicted our first effort, really, a pictorial message to the stars, to another civilization of who humanity was and where we were and the solar system itself. It was pretty inspiring and actually followed later with the 1979 golden record on the Voyager spacecrafts. These were really our first attempts at a physical message, any kind of message really, sent out to the stars. So it inspired many of us. But that seemed to be the end of it. There hasn't really been any concerted effort since then. The New Horizons spacecraft didn't have anything like that on board it. That was our fifth interstellar spacecraft that went out. And I think this bugged some of us. In particular, it bugged my guest today, that is Nick Searra, who is the founder of the Interstellar Foundation. He founded it in 2021 and now serves as its executive director. So the Interstellar Foundation is trying to address this problem. Look, we live in a space age, a new space age, not the 1960s space age that we had, but a new version inspired by the work of SpaceX and Blue Origin. There is a sense that we might be going back to these interstellar deep space probes again in the near future. And if so, perhaps that is going to be an opportunity for us to communicate once again to the stars. And so what do we say? How do we say it? What is the medium? These are deep and challenging questions, and those are all of the questions the Interstellar Foundation is trying to address, and the sorts of things we're going to get into today. So please enjoy my conversation as we explore what humanity should be saying to the stars, to other alien civilizations, how we should do it, and ultimately how you can actually get involved in this effort. So please stay tuned. Let's go into it. Thanks for joining me, Nick.
Oh, David, thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm a big fan, so
yeah. Well, we've got a lot to talk about because this project that, we got involved with, it feels like during the pandemic, I think it was, when you first invited me and got me interested in this project. It really is something that I'm pleased somebody is taking hold of. So the idea here is to renew the golden record, this famous project that I remember that Sagan was involved with and got many of us inspired. Let's start there. Let's start with the history of the numerous attempts, because it's not just that one attempt of trying to put something on a spacecraft that would go out and maybe aliens could discover a message from humanity. So how many times have we done this, and what is the history of that?
Sure. I think if we did start with the golden record, I think it's just a great story. Murmurs of Earth, if anybody wants to read a book in terms of really sort of good sort of feedback around what...
Is that Sagan's book? Or?
Sagan's book, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think if we sort of looked at, say, the golden record as a starting point, sort of mid-70s, somebody in an office in NASA basically had figured out that they could slingshot a mission that was already sort of planning for sort of the outer solar system. They used the planetary alignment to basically slingshot out. So it was going to be the first spacecraft that we were sending into interstellar space. Apparently somebody walked into Richard Nixon's office, I think the director of NASA at that time, and said the last time this happened, Lincoln was in the office and he messed it up.
Oh, wow. You mean since the alignment?
Since the alignment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
He missed it. I think it was he messed it up.
Yeah.
And apparently he found it very funny, and he was like, cool, let's do it. And they got approved for the mission. And I think at that time, so
this was Voyager 1 or 2 or both of them?
Both of them.
They were launched
So NASA only got budgeting for one, but they put budgeting for 2 missions in their budget for one mission, and they just said it was the one mission apparently.
Oh.
And
Good trick. Yeah,
it's a good trick. And essentially, I wouldn't say celebrity scientists, but Carl Sagan at the time was one of the first people that was really working to try and make science more accessible from a media perspective,
Right.
and kind of get the word out there from just the very inspirational thing of like once you start to learn a little bit about the universe and a little bit about the world.
Was this pre-Cosmos, I guess?
I think this was pre-Cosmos.
Because
Yeah.
I think it's true. Yeah, I remember hearing this the other day that I think David Grinspoon mentioned this on a podcast I was listening to him. I think it was on Star Talk, and he said that one of the first shots they did for the Cosmos series was in the Voyager 1 or 2 control room when they got the first image of maybe it was Europa, I think he mentioned, and they were in the room and they got these first shots and it was sort of capturing people's reactions. And so that, I think they shot that in 1979, and Cosmos mostly was shot, I think, in early 1980. So yeah, it must have been like one of the first things. So it's interesting that Sagan was into it, because this was certainly before his peak as a household name at this point. Yeah.
And I think maybe just to also go back maybe one. So prior to that was the Pioneer missions, and the Pioneer missions were essentially also going to be interstellar missions, but the first sort of look at that was basically Carl Sagan and Drake had kind of come together and designed what was a plaque that was going to go onto the side of Pioneer. And I think it also around about that time is when he'd come up with the Drake equation that had a meeting around that time. And
so the Pioneer plaque predated
predated the golden record, yeah.
And
so,
was that on, because there was 2 Pioneers, there was Pioneer 1 and 2.
Yeah.
They both went interstellar, I think. Was it on both of them or just one?
I think it was on both of them.
Okay.
Voyager overtook Pioneer, I think around about the 80s. It's been a while since I read the book.
Yeah.
But
and
I think,
do you remember what the contents of, what does it look like, the Pioneer plaque?
it's actually similar to the golden record. So if you look at anybody that has a golden record tattoo,
There are quite a few of those.
There are quite a few.
Do you have one?
I don't have one. There are people on our team. Team. That was like when I was first meeting people. Somebody had said, like, the first person was like, "Yeah, I was like, do you know the project?" And she was like, "Yeah, I have a tattoo."
Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, you're in." I mean, like, that's a good, like, if you from an interview perspective. So.
That's a good interview tip. If you interview for a company,
and you got a tattoo. If you got a tattoo of the thing, then
you're in. Okay,
then you're in. So I think most people recognize the roundness of the golden record. Maybe the golden record cover. So the Pioneer cover was basically like, it's just a rectangle, and it's got similar aspects to it. And then they basically took that and they expanded on that for the golden record.
So it's a depiction of a human.
Yeah, depiction of a human.
Charts.
On Pioneer, though, I think they've also got the star charts. So essentially the pulsars, I think there was 13 pulsars that we knew of at that time.
Yeah.
Which is, again, sort of why if we recreate it now, we might have that as one of them. But I understand that we know there are a lot more pulsars.
Yeah. So I'm curious, one of the things I want to ask you about was, and we'll get into the version 2, which you're designing and helping to lead this team to put together. But I'm curious with the history of this, there's a possible negative reaction to this. I'm sure there were negative reactions. I think one famously was the depiction of the woman, right? That there was controversy about whether her genitalia would be shown. And Sagan insisted that it should be shown because that's what the human form looks like. And there was a significant lobbying force to say, no, that's whatever, it's unchristian or something. You can't show this. So there was forces like that happening.
Yeah, I mean, just on that. So at the time when the Pioneer went out, that was the first time that a naked image was shown on Canadian television. So there was a Canadian news channel that basically had this, and they had a photo of this, and then they got a lot of calls in at that time, and that was like maybe early 70s, 72, 73,
lost its innocence.
And people complaining about the naked images on the Pioneer plaque. Yeah, there was also a little bit of controversy now around sort of like the man is the one waving and the woman is saying, is kind of a little bit less, or a little bit, not saying hello, standing next to him.
Yeah. I guess the thing I was kind of more curious about, right, because that's all just kind of cultural stuff, but the fact that we have the star chart on there is kind of interesting, because that's basically giving an alien potentially a map as to where to find us. And someone might, I mean, Stephen Hawking was famously pretty uncomfortable with the idea of METI. So METI is the messaging of extraterrestrial intelligence, which is kind of the counter to SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And there have been many people, many well-known scientists, including Hawking, who have said we shouldn't be sending out messages, period. Because whenever you look at human interactions historically, and one species or one race was much more technologically advanced than another, that usually ended up being an absolute disaster for the lesser technologically developed civilization. And so were people already concerned about that, or was it they were mostly just concerned about the stupid stuff like the genitalia?
Yeah, I think from the METI question, I think there's maybe two aspects to it. So it took Voyager, let's say, 50 years to leave the solar system, and it'll take Voyager about 40,000 years to get to our nearest star. We're pretty sure that there's nothing in between then. So even now we would reference it as maybe very, very slow METI.
Yeah, of course.
And
slow on human timescales.
Yes.
Fast on maybe cosmic timescales, actually. I mean, because you can actually cross, even at Voyager 1 speeds, you can cross the entire Milky Way 7 times over in its history. So
sure.
We think of it as very slow, and it feels very slow. But if we look out to billions, even trillions of years, it seems like this thing could go a very long distance, in fact.
I hadn't really heard of, or in terms of people that I've spoken to that made the golden record. So Ann Durian, Carl Sagan's wife, and John Lombard. There didn't seem to be much around the METI stuff. I think the METI stuff from a radio signal perspective is maybe a little bit more controversial. The fact that I think maybe a decade, maybe 15 years ago, there was a Doritos ad sent out to a particular planetary system, and I've watched the adverts, and it is like an animation kind of advert, and the humans are the Dorito chips are essentially there's a salsa god, and it's an advert. I mean, which would be, I think, confusing to ever found the adverts. I'm in, there's a lot of arguments around whether it's there's the dark forest and the idea that on the positive side, if we went to the zoo and we looked at a zebra in the zoo, or a zebra for those
British
at home,
folks, you're South African.
I'm South African.
You say zebra, right?
Zebra, yeah.
Okay.
And as a South African, as an African, I feel like I can say zebra.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't really notice the zebra in the zoo too much. But if that zebra started like tapping out prime numbers, and people were looking at it, and people were like, this is quite amazing. Like pretty soon there would be a lot of people there going, wow, this is actually now becoming an interesting zebra in context to maybe other zebras. And the idea that if any species is going to survive, they have to get past the idea of like competitive war amongst themselves, potentially competitive war amongst their regional maybe partners in terms of where they are in the galaxy, and maybe more of the Star Trek idea of sort of this, there's a federation of different planets, and once you become interesting enough, then you're kind of welcomed into this. And then on the other side of it is the dark forest side, where if you're walking through a dark forest and you're Little Red Riding Hood, you don't want to be shouting too loudly. And if anybody's seen the Three-Body Problem or read the book, then
I have lots of thoughts about that. I did a video recently about grabby aliens, the grabby aliens hypothesis, and I said in the video, maybe I should talk about the dark forest at some point as well, because it's even more popular, I think, as a solution to the Fermi paradox. And the thing that kind of bugs me about it, and I have to think how to better articulate this if I do a video on it, is the assumptions about their sort of technological capabilities. So there's an assumption they have the ability to eradicate us, right? And that's why we want to be careful and not send out messages. But at the same time, that kind of implies they lack the ability to know about us presently, which seems like a paradox. Like, we are already developing telescopes which are capable of detecting biosignatures, oxygen, methane, complex molecules in the atmospheres of other planets. We already have plans of ways to image planets, to be able to even detect a pre-industrial civilization. You could, detect the smoke and the villages and the changing of the coastal regions and, the damming in the rivers, all this kind of stuff. So we think it's possible. We can't do it yet, that we could do this in the next 100 years. And that's certainly a lot easier, it seems, than trying to fly there and drop nukes or whatever it is to destroy them. So I always just think if there's others out there and they're this advanced, there's no need to be fearful of them, because they already know we're here, and if they didn't want Earth to be here, we wouldn't be here, right? It's kind of not that difficult to nudge an asteroid and just put it on course for us and end everything. So I think there's many ways that a civilization could efficiently clear out their neighborhood. The fact that hasn't happened, to me, means they're not malevolent.
I think there's also the part of it of why would they be doing it. And I think if you looked at maybe human history, there's very much a resource aspect to that. And sure, Earth is an incredibly amazing place, but would somebody really, from another place, would they really need the resources of Earth? I also can't really believe in the idea of sort of a matrix that they're going to use humans to farm us or to eat us.
This is ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, the resource thing makes no sense. Like, if you want water, like, why would there's water everywhere in the universe?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like it's a resource in short demand.
I mean, I can understand the intergalactic highway one. Right, that if you're going to build an intergalactic highway, like in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that's you're just going to have to, you're just in the way, and we're going to have to go through. But then again,
it's not really relevant to METI, right? Because they're going to, whether we send them a radio message or not, is not really going to influence their decision to build that highway.
Sure.
If an ant's in the middle of the road saying, "Please don't squish me," we're still going to build that highway. So, yeah. Anyway, I also say that I kind of agree with, I think, the idea of this is worth trying, because those fear mongers about this more dark, destructive path, I think I have some reservations about the logic that they're using there.
It is straight. I think we very seldom talk about, we talk a lot about communication. So I think in terms of like, what would communication look like over vast timescales? I think the idea that if there was 40,000 years to go until it gets to the first star, and we kind of know that there's nothing there, I think if we haven't built something to go fetch it in 40,000 years, we're probably not progressing as much as we were progressing before. I think what it's really good at as a project is really talking about, what's happening, what our time is. Like the golden record is like, it's the spacecraft itself, the actual medium is really sort of a part of that particular time. I did, I think maybe 6 months into the project, like wake up at 4 a.m. going, wow, we're working on a project that if aliens did come down now, and this is a really good project, we would kind of know a lot about communication and how, and I thought, like, somebody's going to fly with a helicopter and pick me up and be like, we need you right now to somebody's arrived. And
like an arrival or something.
Like an arrival.
Like, yeah. Get you on a plane right now.
And it wouldn't be me. I'd be like, okay, these are the scientists that you should be speaking to. These are the people. I can tell you who to speak to. It's not this guy.
Well, it's hard. I mean, no one's really trained in this, so I think you're pretty much just as qualified as anyone else, to be honest. But one thing I wanted to ask you about with the contents of the message was sort of what we choose to include and not include. And obviously we've highlighted some controversies already in terms of the golden record. And I think in that record there was also some images, right? There were some photos. And one thing that always struck me about those photos, it was photos of 3 people eating. Do you remember this one? Have you seen this one? I'll probably flash it up when we edit this. And you go through all these pictures, but there's people eating. And imagine you were just a totally different organism, and just the very concept of someone eating food was strange because you got your energy from photosynthesis or something. And that was just a bizarre concept to you. You might well wonder what happens to that mass, right? By the conservation of mass. And so it's a little bit of a gross subject, but I always thought they should probably show someone defecating to like actually complete the story.
It's
Yeah, although just and I was really thinking of this, it sounds like such a strange thing to say, but I was thinking of this mostly like if we got images of an alien, and we would be interested in the biology, especially if it was very, very, very different from us, and we would treat it like a biological a study case. And so we would want to know about the entire life cycle, the birth, the death, the consumption, the sexual reproduction, the excretion. We want to know about everything. And we obviously chose certain information for cultural reasons that we were not comfortable with showing that. I still doubt we would do that today. But it does imply to me that when we design these messages, they're not truly designed with the intent of, I want to make the alien's life as easy as possible. I don't think we can honestly say that, because there is that kind of missing information. And similarly, you might say we should probably tell them about the fact we have nuclear weapons and we have had a very warlike history. We're basically at war all the time at somewhere in the world, and we have these weapons of mass destruction, and we've even used them on this planet. So it feels like we admit certain things, and I guess that's a really difficult topic to know where to land on. But
I got a couple.
Where would you? What is your position about it? If someone said we should censor certain information, would you agree with that, or would you take issue with that?
I think the beautiful thing about the project is it does incite these conversations, and they're kind of in conversations that are maybe important to be had at a broader scale as well. I would say from the Golden Record perspective, having done our first couple of messages, you really kind of get to understand how difficult it is to get from the perfect message to what's possible. That particular photo as well, they'd literally left Cornell University, walked down the road to the closest store, in the store, took the photo, and essentially it's always just going to be a group of people that are working on it at the time, and this is obviously pre the internet, and they had to use the resources that they had, which was quite small. I think on a broader perspective of what we want to send, I think from their perspective, they looked at the idea was that if you met somebody at a cocktail party or at a dinner party, you start with your best foot forward.
Yeah.
You start with the good stuff, and you tell them about all the stuff that we're doing and how wonderful we are.
It's like your Tinder profile.
It's your Tinder profile. You don't start with war. You start with we do. But having spoken, I spoke to Anne about this, and she was like, if she had to do it again now,
and Sagan's
wife, right. I think is also the unsung hero of the project, in the sense of like, she was an equal partner, and there were a lot of people that worked on the project, and she was like, I'd send everything. And we kind of are sort of torn between what that would look like of sending everything, and I can get into the reason why it's almost impossible to send everything unless something really changes. It's essentially copyright. But I think there's so much. I'd be the first to say it's an impossible project, because what we're trying to explain is what it means to be human in some way, and granularity is like really important in that. Like you could take a really wide shot of Earth and you get the whole context of Earth, but you could take a shot of an atom or something like that, and there's everything in between that we could explain. And I think humans have that maybe similar complexity to it, which we could look at the individual, we could look at the collective, we could look at culture. When we started the project, there was a lot of talk about, cool, let's talk about our mathematics, and let's talk about our physics, and let's talk about how we understand the universe. And that's really, really beautiful. What about philosophical problems that we don't think there's any answers to, or the recipe for tomato, which is what I would love to send the recipe for tomato, because I think if we got a message and then somebody was like, well, what if they die, and what if you kill an alien because they've just eaten a compound that they can't eat,
well, that's kind of on them. If they grow something and then immediately consume it, that they should maybe be more careful.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say the goal, and I want to ask you about the Interstellar Foundation, so we should get to that with this question. Hopefully I'll work there. But it is interesting you talk about the goal of these messages to be explaining what it's like to be human. And that is not purely a positive experience, right? I mean, if you read a lot of like Eastern philosophy, life is suffering. It's like a fundamental mantra of Buddhism. And when we are moved by art or movies or a book, it's not always just a happy story. There's often darker components to that, which really resonate with us and speak to the human experience. And so, yeah, it does feel like if that is truly the objective, to explain what it's like to be human, we cannot truly omit that information, because it would be not only dishonest but just totally incomplete. It would be superficial.
I actually think I need to rephrase that a little bit, in the sense that I think what I found most incredible about the project is my own personal journey through what it is. And when I say that the purpose of the project is to explain what it means to be human, I think that's more an indication of the personal journey for me right now. And that's maybe even different from 6 months ago, and it'll be very different from 6 months' time.
Yeah.
Because I think we've really looked at sort of from a collective idea of who we are. So how we collect, how we come together. On our first message, we put on all of the world's constitutions, but then how the world's constitutions have changed since they first started being written, and the idea of things like liberty and the way that we think about these sorts of topics. And I think if you asked me in 6 months, I'd probably give you a slightly different answer. And I think that if you looked at sort of what our goal is as a foundation, it's to represent the planet, as well as humanity. I think I have just become really fond of humans since, and like really appreciative of like this kind of amazing journey that we've gone on as a species, and I think we're pretty cool. I think we have a natural evolutionary program in us that says it's all bad all the time, or it's really difficult, and that's a really good evolutionary thing to want to fix it. Yeah. And we've got a lot of work to do, and we've got a lot of things that we need to fix. But we have been making progress, and it's slow, but yeah.
We'll be right back after this short message. So we might want aliens to one day know that we exist with a golden record type project, but we don't want them, or indeed anyone else, going through our very personal information. And that is where today's sponsor, Incogni.com, comes into play. I've been partnering with Incogni for a while now because it is such a great service, cleaning up your digital footprint online. If you're like me, you probably hate having to fill out personal information in a form online because it inevitably comes around to bite you. You get hounded with spam emails and phone calls. Because the truth is, there are many companies out there actively harvesting and selling your personal data. One way to fight back is Incogni, who scour databases for your personal information, and then they use the weight of the law to demand that your data is removed. And what's great is that they keep at it, persisting until compliance is met. Before Incogni, I was getting bombarded with spam phone calls to such a degree that I basically had to stop answering the phone. And on top of that, I was getting weird emails that somehow had my home address in them. I got to a point where I was just sick of this crap. And if you are too, then head to incogni.com/coolworldspodcast for an exclusive discount of 60% off their annual plan. Once again, that's incogni.com/coolworldspodcast. Using that link supports our podcast production costs too, so please do check them out. Now back to the conversation. So let's talk about this foundation then, because we've been sort of dancing around this a little bit, because I want to give some context, but let's really talk about this organization you founded and what its goals are, especially the continuation of this legacy that we've been talking about thus far.
Sure. Like I'd watched a documentary maybe 3 years ago. Then Googled.
What's the documentary?
The Furthest. BBC documentary called The Furthest,
okay,
which is a documentary on the golden record.
Okay.
And as soon as it finished, I Googled if we're sending messages on current spacecraft. And I think it was the New Horizons mission. And there was this feeling of, as soon as I found out that there wasn't anything on the New Horizons mission, I was like, that's a bit sad that, this spacecraft is going into
I didn't know that. Yeah, that's
into
a shame.
into interstellar space, and there's nothing about who made it and what the time was like at when it was made. And thought, it seems crazy that nobody's doing this. And I sent out maybe 100 emails, and I think I have a problem with starting projects. I start a lot of projects, and then it's by far the best response back that I'd sent out to some of the best philosophers, and it was always funny, like who would be the best people to come together. So in the beginning especially, it was all academics and scientists and National Geographic explorers, and we had this team of maybe 20, 30 people that would meet and sort of chat about what's important and what can be included, and there's also been sort of shifts in that, maybe more to creative art and poets, and there is a part of me that really understands that it's a really small spacecraft in a really big amount of space.
You mean specifically like New Horizons? Or
any message that we send out there on a spacecraft.
So the goal is then to do an updated version of this golden record.
Yeah.
That many, not just one, but whoever's going out there, here you go, an off-the-shelf golden record you can attach.
So we try hit trials wherever we can get, right? So we're going to be on part of the Artemis missions with LifeShip, the Firefly lander. We're also going to be on the Astroforge asteroid mission, which we don't know which asteroid it is because they're still a little bit. And that's going to be our first message that's leaving the solar system. And then I will note that it is coming back to the solar system when the asteroid comes back.
Yeah.
And we think that there's hopefully going to be a message. Well, there's hopefully going to be a mission for an interstellar mission, maybe mid-2030s. So we kind of think we've got like a 12 or 13-year runway.
What would be fun would be an Oumuamua.
Oh, sure.
So this is this interstellar asteroid, and there's now thought to be many of these things passing through the solar system. And ESA has a planned mission. I'm not sure its status, but they want to sort of build a mission that will kind of float around in space waiting for the next Oumuamua. And then as soon as that Oumuamua comes, they'll hit the engines, full burn, and try and intercept it and get on that thing. Because that thing's going out.
Oh, I'm trying to think of the book. It's one of my...
Arthur C. Clarke?
Yeah, Arthur C. Clarke. Rendezvous with Rama.
Rendezvous with Rama.
That's one of the greatest. One of the most beautiful sci-fi.
Yeah. So that would be perfect because just when you put a spacecraft out, you're right, a spacecraft is very small. And not only is it very small, it's easily destroyed by micrometeorites in space, by interstellar dust, and even just kind of the gradual decay of radiation on the surface will, over billions of years, will turn that thing into a puddle of metal, basically. But an interstellar asteroid has already survived billions of years. If you can get onto that surface, especially if you can dig in a little bit and penetrate in and put something in interior, that feels like you'd have longevity, and you'd be on an interstellar spaceship, which is the asteroid.
Sure.
Yeah, that would be. We should talk to those guys.
I love it. Let's do it. Let's do it. And it's you heard it here first.
Yeah, this is the exclusive.
This is the exclusive. This is how ideas. This is how this happens.
Yeah.
I think one of the most powerful parts of the project is its ability for humans to try and think about themselves and about the planet, and not necessarily there's the environmental aspects of, like, what does our environment look like, what are we doing, and collecting sort of this information maybe for another species to find it, to say that if we're no longer here and you see us, this is what's happened, this is what we've done to sort of mess up our planet or destroy our planet, and now we're no longer here. But I think the exploration into the anything that where you dig a little bit deeper, you find it's a little bit more interesting. And then I think with this, because it's so broad, there's so many different rabbit holes, you just start to realize that there's just a lot of interesting stuff around everywhere about life and about the planet and about humans, and I think for me there's a part of it where if people are, one of the questions we ask is maybe what is your aspiration for the planet?
You're asking
we ask
potential authors of the record this question.
Yeah. And for us, we really do try and not. We as a team want to basically set up the parameters for global participation. And that's most of the projects that we do are around, we're working with the Scout movement, the Girl Guide movement, to potentially get 6 million young people to go out and record stories and record sounds, and record language from around the world. And
so I guess that's an important change, that you've got a much bigger data volume than
we've got we've got tools now that will allow us to really try get a better representation of the whole planet. And we often talk about representation in that context. This was a group of people that were incredibly progressive and really, really tried to be fully representative of the planet. And at the time, there's 27 pieces of music, there's 3 Bach songs, that's how much space that they had, like, to put on this vinyl disc. We could send, there's some incredible work from a material perspective at the University of Southampton. We could send every single recorded song, every song that's ever been recorded by humans. We could send every single book that's ever been written by humans. We could send every movie that's ever been made. We could send all of this information.
Cool videos.
We could send all the Cool Worlds videos.
So let's ask about the format then. So I have 2 practical questions that we're kind of dancing around. One is, what will be the format? Is it a DVD? Is it a Blu-ray? Like, what's the actual thing look like? And then second, who gets to decide what is on the record? Because I'm sure people will have strong feelings about that point.
Sure. I think I would maybe say that I would like to, whoever's watching this, I would like them to come and participate firstly on both sides of that, in terms of what materials we use, because there's a lot more challenges than there are solutions. So we currently look at if somebody finds a message, or if a message is found and the finder of the message needs to know that that's a message, so there has to be a cover. There has to be some sort of an analog cover that is not digital. We have most of our information in a digital form. So we have a digital component, which we have to explain how somebody can open up a JPEG, or whoever finds the message can open up a JPEG as an example.
The description key.
Cover would be yes. Let me actually go in order, because that would probably make more sense. So you've got the cover, which is sort of the key to open up maybe the next stage. Then we use something called either nanofish or microfish, which is, we can get maybe 20,000 pages of, like, kind of A4 pages into a couple of layers, and with a microscope you can kind of then tell that that's a message. And so we have that 20,000 pages where you could then start to explain what else is there.
Is that just basically like tiny ink?
It's more ceramic, so they basically put it onto ceramic discs, and then we use encoded DNA, so synthetic DNA. One of the ideas with encoded synthetic DNA is that if all life in the universe needs some sort of a code, or some sort of or is DNA based, then we often look for ways that we could cross the medium with maybe parts of the communication aspect. That they would have some sort of at some point in their development as a species, they would have had DNA, and they would understand what code DNA looks like, and we can kind of look at that.
That does seem like a part where maybe someone might be worried that that's too presumptuous, right? Because there's already RNA as an example, which is pretty similarly closely related to DNA, but that already shows us that there's multiple potential information storage systems. If it was truly alien, that concept might be foreign to them. So is there any way that you can teach them how to read the message of the DNA?
So we also start with assumptions. Assumption would be that they can build a spacecraft. We also are constrained by what we can produce. So there was talk about an olfactory message, but for us to put our information all into smell and then have a code with that would be difficult. So we make assumptions that, looking at convergent evolution, eyes are something that pop up in most species on the planet. So that's a very common thing. So we've got a visual message. We also use the tool of video as probably one of the most powerful tools. So the ability with information to connect time, to show direction, to and that's a still image. So if you take videos, if it's 60 frames a second, 60 single frames. So if you put images next to each other and you're slightly changing them, we're able to. So one of the starts of the messages could be something like the Big Bang. From the Big Bang to where we are now, we often talk about context, even if that's in still images, would hopefully create enough context to be able to go, okay, now that's the start of the conversation, and we can then take whoever's reading this message into maybe the next part. And we look at sort of hierarchical aspects of that. So starting with smaller bits of information and then going a bit deeper. And where we found really good resources is video game designers. So we had a couple of discussions with MIT Media Labs, and video game design is really about kind of looking at that like very, very small amounts of information and then guiding the player through the game. And there's a very fun part of that. One of the projects that we're putting out there probably at the end of the year is a video competition. So we're going to be asking any video editors, video makers to come up with a 60-second video of explaining sort of the Big Bang to where we are now. So that this idea of finding similarities. So whoever's going to find the message is also of this universe, of this galaxy. They would, if they can build a spacecraft, they will probably have a basic idea of physics, and will have also gone through a time where either that they thought that there was a Big Bang, or where they know that there was a Big Bang. So we really sort of, and then I think after the movie Arrival, we are very lucky that we have a lot of linguists in our team.
Right.
So we look at sort of the ontological frameworks and the epistemological frameworks of communication. From who decides? I think we're constrained by funding. We're constrained by copyrights, and one of the ideas to kind of get around that is to create the framework for participation.
So if someone's listening to this, how could they get their message into one of these records? What's the advice for doing that?
Sure. I would say that at the moment, probably the best thing is to join our team. So we've got, our team's probably maybe about 300 people now, and that's not maybe team is a strong word, from becoming a participant in the project. So, voice what you would like to be in that. Come to our meetings. We try and make them entertaining and fun. Join our Slack channel.
And how can they do that? Just reach out to you. What's the
so if you go onto our website, interstellarfoundation.com, and then we're doing a lot of work with different organizations. We do a lot of work with UNESCO, higher education, UNESCO archives, and we're starting to work with museums now as well. I think what I've been surprised at is how maybe inaccessible some of the story is about us. I think we've got an incredible resource in the internet. We can kind of get into how we represent AI, but it's quite broad, but not maybe. We work with the Internet Archive, and we're thinking about putting just the whole internet onto a message if we can fit it on. That would be a bit of a nightmare for any alien anthropologist
to make sense of. Just too much. Yeah,
that would be a lot of.
There's low signal to noise, essentially. Right? There's too much. Yeah. The background's too high. But the choice of the medium is obviously. There's a couple of thoughts I have when I think about this. One is, I think I remember reading once that papyrus, which is one of the oldest forms of paper, of course, has a lifetime of thousands and thousands of years, whereas we've replaced that now with paper, and that has a lifetime of centuries. And then we replace that with tapes, magnetic tapes, and they have lifetimes of decades. And then we end up replacing those with like DVDs, and DVDs last a few years, and then they stop working. And so as we've gone to these denser and denser formats, there has been the challenge of how do you produce, especially for a project like this, most importantly, longevity in the signal. So I think the DNA aspect could be really interesting approach there, because DNA clearly has been around for a very long time, and if it's in the right environment, I can imagine something like that surviving. We've often dug up something from shards of DNA from millions of years ago in well-preserved conditions. So it seems like at least there is hope of preserving it. And I just wanted to comment on the vision thing. I think that's one of the things, because I was in many of these meetings early on, and I remember the vision thing was something I was kind of not sure about, because it felt to me that there are many examples of life on Earth that did not evolve eyes, even though it has evolved 5 times at least independently. There are things like moles or things which live in the bottom of the ocean where there's just no need for it. And so it's not that evolution is not capable of developing eyes. It's just that evolution is always trying to find, solutions to problems. But there's just that isn't a solution to have eyes when you're in the bottom of the ocean. And so it's possible a species is evolving in an environment where light is just not there, whether it be below Europa's surface or below a planetary surface, something like this, or a very cloudy planet maybe. But I do think at the same time, there's many senses, I think, arguing against myself a little bit, we can't see ultrasound or hear ultrasound, but we can easily interpret it. We can build machines which can detect those signals, and then we transmute those signals into our own senses. So we convert the ultrasound into a visual picture, because that's how we work with eyes, or we can pitch it down into a sound. And so I suspect in the same way that it's whatever sense system they have, they will surely know about light, the existence of light, and therefore they will understand that it is possible to change that information into an information framework that they can understand. So I've sort of become more at peace with that decision over time. But I think when I first encountered it, I was thinking, I was reading this book called Andy Weir.
The new one?
The new one, Hail Mary Project.
Yeah.
And he meets an alien, spoiler alert, if you haven't read the book, but there's an alien who doesn't have eyes, that's all I'll say. Has no concept of vision. And I was reading that at the same time in these meetings, and I was thinking, oh, that's an interesting thing we should be careful of. But it might be
maybe a good segue into artificial intelligence. So there is maybe a positive with having some sort of a message that has the ability to adapt to who's finding the message, and whether that's I was lucky enough to talk at a nursery school. I've spoken at a university, and I've spoken at a high school. And the nursery schools, they were by far on. They had they would just put a big button on it. And you just push the button, and the message starts. Yeah. And that self-starting message idea is actually a really good, important idea. All you have to do is basically just whoever's going to find the message, it's not going to blow up, and it's not going to kill you, and it is something that is a message, and then some sort of a guide through that message, and that would hopefully also then be able to address some of the ideas that if it was whatever their preferred, that's an idea.
So how would you get an AI? Let's say you wanted ChatGPT, but some customized version of it, let's say.
Sure. This is unlimited budgets. That's the unlimited budget.
You have to get around the copyright and all the infringement issues. But
and you also have to, I was chatting about this the other day, would we have to send all of human information for the algorithm to basically work from? Or, But
it seems like an interesting approach, because if you do just do a Wikipedia dump, you kind of have the same issue. It's not as low signal to noise as the entire internet, but it still isn't fantastic signal to noise, because there are mistakes on Wikipedia, and there's also just a lot of fluff. I mean, if you were really looking for a specific piece of information, but you didn't really understand the search system that we'd come up with, you could waste a lot of time scouring through. I mean, I've spent many a night scouring through Wikipedia, and I'm a human looking for information that I want, often just getting lost in tangents and things, which is lots of fun on Wikipedia. But maybe an AI agent is more interesting, because it could potentially learn something about the questioner, and become more effective at providing the information they're most interested in. So is there a serious effort to try and put an AI into one of these?
I think where we are now, so, and there's also some interesting conversations around, I think in the beginning, so when we started having the conversation, which is kind of an interesting sort of our own progression on how we now see AI, there was a lot of people that were like, we shouldn't put AI because AI might be banned in the universe. And it was around about that time that ChatGPT had just launched, and everybody was like, now we're all gonna die because the AIs are gonna take over. And I think after 3 years, we've kind of realized that that's not really what ChatGPT is, and that's almost not what AI is as well. Which again is maybe just an interesting thing of like, whenever you send a message, and this is when we put AI, because we put ChatGPT, we asked ChatGPT a question 2 years ago, and we've included that in the mission that's gone to the moon. Whatever we put on now, in maybe 50 years, is going to seem a little bit outdated.
Yeah.
In 50,000 years and 5 million years, yeah. So. You know, we also included the algorithm of ChatGPT, which is, I think, was written in the 50s or the 60s. So we just, we put that in. Coming maybe back to the discussion of, what we put on. We really sort of look at this as maybe putting on a multitude of different ways of either from analog to digital. From, if there is an AI component, that would form maybe a component of it. There would be an audio aspect, there would be a video aspect, there would be sort of, one of the goals is to be able to teach it a language, a human language, because obviously once we teach it a human language, then it opens up all of the content that would be sort of that we're in there. I think the difficulty, maybe even the more difficult one, is the what do we choose part. Because it is very, very subjective to the individual of what is important to them. We all have lived a life where we've had a very small slice of the universe. There's things I know, there's things I don't know, and what I don't even know that I don't even know is I know that that's most of it. I know that there's more stuff that I do not know that I don't even know. And
also just the conflicting values. I can imagine one religious sect being strongly opposed to presenting information about their opposing religious sects, that this would be somehow blasphemous to include this information. I think at our last meeting, we've also got kind of a little bit into the philosophical aspects of it. So super, super interesting discussion around whether we focus on the individual or whether we focus on the collective. And the idea that when we focus on the collective, whether that's black or white or male or female, or, from a religious perspective or from a cultural perspective, there's a lot of beauty in culture, but the speaker was sort of referencing that how potentially even something like in 100 years, the whole planet might look back and go, humans were terrible. They literally farmed cows and they ate them. Yeah. That's terrible, because like we look back at 200 years ago and we're like, people like put people in boats, in ships, and sailed them across the ocean as slaves. And we understand fundamentally now that it just was terrible. And do we tell the story of humanity more from the individual perspective of this is what a human is in terms of the way that they see the world or the way that they look at it, instead of maybe focusing on like, but it's an impossible project. These are hard questions. And, there's an aspect here, which we often say in SETI, I think Jill Tarter probably coined this, that SETI is a cosmic mirror. And that when we engage in SETI, it's as much as an activity in introspection as it is looking for actual alien intelligences. And the reason is because even the methods we choose, radio, that's because we have radio. If we use laser beams, it's because we've recently invented laser beams. More recently, you look on ideas and setting, they talk about looking for solar panels on planets because we've recently started getting into building solar panels everywhere. And so it's very much that the methods we use, and I think it's also true of the content we include in the Golden Record. You can see it with this, the genitalia thing, or, what was allowed and not allowed to go into that. it is a reflection of the society at the time. And it is a time capsule of who we are. And I'm sure we'll be different in 1,000 years from now, but it really does capture that. And it's, in a sense, perhaps the greatest product of this project is not as an effort to interact with aliens, but actually as providing anthropologists in 1,000 years from now an attempt, like the Seed Vault is, at putting everything together into one place, and you can look back and it is like a record of who we were, not for the aliens, but for ourselves, our future selves.
And I'm so glad that also we've got here, because for me, the idea that our time is important enough for us we all share this time. Everybody on the planet now might not share the same preference in food, but the same, idea of what's the best movie, but we all do share this time. And for me, I feel this time is important enough for us to come together and go, how would we like to represent this time? And I think that the time aspect for me has become almost the bigger question of, what are we doing now? So when we put our first message together, that was very much of that. We focused the message of what it was like in 2022. And we just come out of COVID. So there's about an hour of video on the pandemic. And, we work with different partners. We were lucky enough to work with Getty Images and their archiving team. We put together a collection of YouTube, essentially people explaining what it is like in their lives, which is another maybe 45-minute video. And it's very much to show what we are at this time.
Yeah.
And we all kind of forget it because we're in it. And we think that it's kind of beautiful, and it's kind of special, and it's kind of important. And, I think if I found an archive, the medium of the archive, I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. It's like color TV. It's not even in my brain. So like, it's just a flat screen. Like, I mean, that's shocking. Like, why is it not 360? And, but it's still, you're still going to get that feeling of like, wow. When I watch movies now of the 20s, of the 50s, or the 60s, I think for me, especially like the 80s and the 90s, because I remember as a kid what it was like to like have those things. Like, there's that sort of sense of nostalgia, but there's also, it's the medium and the messages as much. I think Carl Sagan had said that the spacecraft is as much a part of the message, because it does show, there's more technology in my phone now for 10, than my phone could maybe do 10 Voyager 2s in terms of on the spacecraft.
I kind of suspect also, thinking about what we, as a reflection on us, when we look at old videos and old photos, I've gone on this rabbit hole on YouTube many times. There's a huge cottage industry of upscaling things, using modern AI tools to take footage from New York City 120 years ago. There's these old videos, and they've colorized them, and they've used AI to reconstruct the faces. They've gone to like 4K and high resolution. And I wonder if, the idea of putting an AI into it is almost unnecessary, because their AI will be so much better that they could just use the Wikipedia, whatever we put in there, as a training set. So we don't need to give them our crappy software. Just give them the data is all they really care about. And they'll use that data to create, if they want to interact with the data, they'll probably do that themselves. The thing I was thinking about with, because you've got this mission going to the moon, and I'm so happy one's going to the moon, because the moon for me is like the most interesting place to put a message. We actually have a project in my team, I think we spoke about this before. One of my undergrads is trying to calculate how long things last on the moon. So how long will the Apollo landers last? How long do footprints last? All this kind of stuff. And obviously 2001 Space Odyssey plays with the idea of this being this, the monument thing, this slab, which is buried under the lunar surface. And it's a fantastic place because there's no weathering, there's no atmosphere, there's no rivers, there's no rain or anything, this kind of stuff. So stuff can just survive there for such a long time. And it seems to me the most likely recipient, not just from the historical perspective of we'll probably keep a version here on Earth, but we might annihilate ourselves. Something might happen. And it might not even be humanity. It might be another intelligent species which evolves on this planet. There's a recent estimate that the Earth has, I always thought it was 1 billion years, but a new estimate came out last week that has revised the number to 1.8 billion years left for complex life on this planet. That's huge. I mean, multicellular life was only here 600, 700 million years ago. We've gone from a single cell to us in a third of the time that's left. So it seems like there'll be other things in the future.
And this is why I always find it fascinating to chat to you. And I think, the moon is fantastic. I still reference something that I think you told me maybe 2.5 years ago, that around Jupiter would be a fun place to put a message as well, because from the perspective of something lasting as long as it can last.
Some of the resonances there are very stable, and you can keep material in orbit for a long time. There have been attempts to calculate how long you can keep stuff in orbit of the Earth. And it's quite hard actually, because of the dynamical environment we're in. But Jupiter, with its deep gravitational well, stuff just doesn't get out of there. And if it's trapped in resonance of the moons, that could also be a great place. So yeah, that's really exciting to me, because when we think about that, it actually provides not just a pathway for this project, but also inspiration for what we could be doing now. Because who knows, maybe 200 million years ago, someone else had this idea on this planet and left something there. Or even perhaps it's not so wild to believe that, yes, interstellar travel is very difficult. They maybe arrived here millions and millions and millions of years ago, before there was any sign of intelligent life, realized they got here too early, but thought, may as well, let's leave them something, something that they can find when they get ready for that point. I feel like that's a much more feasible way of contact than assuming contemporaneous and spatial alignment, that we all just kind of happen to meet in the right place at the right time. That the beauty of these time capsules is they integrate over the time axis, and they give you a much greater chance of interception. So I think
if we go sort of full circle, the idea of we often think about the receiver of the message, and making a message that is both healthy or beneficial for humans, but also beneficial for whoever finds it. And we've had conversations with the Planetary Society, and I think one of the questions around DNA is, do we want to be polluting when we send out? So or what making sure that what we send out is going to be beneficial.
Yeah, there are so many opportunities with this project, and it's so thought provoking. And one thing I want to make sure I talk to you about is the educational opportunities. You mentioned how you've been working with schools and with the Girl Scouts, you said, or the Boy Scouts, and you've been trying to get them involved. I know from this and from the YouTube stuff, but also just talking to students, when you talk about aliens, it really lights people up. It's a way in. And I often think of SETI, when I do my public outreach, as a vehicle for getting folks interested in science. That you can get hooked on this, and then I can bring you into why stars are interesting, and then I can bring you into why galaxies are interesting, and then why chemistry is interesting, and you can use it just as a kind of an excuse almost. Like, I'm going to sneak science into you without you realizing it. And I feel like the Golden Record has a great opportunity, because we all have viewpoints on this topic. Everyone I've met has had strong views either way, and it's great for debate, which actually is wonderful, because we've been getting into some of that today. So what have been the programs that the Interstellar Foundation has been engaged in to try and exploit this opportunity?
I think as also now the executive director, I'd got into this to come up with a playlist of music to send to space. And now what I spend most of my time on is these two projects. So we have a project which we're basically calling the World Heritage Archive. We are trying to get UNESCO to designate it as a World Heritage Site, and it'll be the first World Heritage Site that goes to space if they say yes. And we're not. They have not said yes.
But it's like a moving site, or is this the one on the moon?
Okay. Well, no, this will be a moving site, and it would also be the safest World Heritage Site in that sense. And then I think we focus on two main areas. So, we look at Global South and Global North. And the Global North, even though the Scouts and the Girl Guides and the Girl Scouts they're in almost every country in the world, and there's a very, I think, SETI had done a program with the Girl Guides here where 600,000 Girl Guides went through a 6-year program that they put together. And there is this incredible opportunity. Working with them is to really to first use the opportunity to teach things about, about culture, about language, about linguistics, about communication, about space, about science, and then also to have them also participating in finding the information that should go into a message. So sort of the dual aspect of that. So that's from maybe the global north perspective. The global south perspective, we work most closely with UNESCO. So on a couple of different areas. So UNESCO has an incredible program called the UNESCO Associated Schools Program, and that's 12,000 schools, pretty much every country in the world, but with a particular focus South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. And they really are some of the least resourced schools. UNESCO hasn't like handpicked, oh, no, that's a nice school, we should work with them. They really are schools that do need the help. And we developed this Space Club. So we really luckily have some of the best, educational program writers. So international education program writers. And the idea with this is to have a Space Club where we're connecting these young people to either higher education institutions or people within higher education institutions, connecting them to different areas of science and STEM, and then also using the idea of space as the catch. So one question could be around, what does food security look like on Mars? And then getting people, say, in Uganda to go, what is the indigenous knowledge in Uganda that has been used for hundreds of thousands of years to address food security in Uganda? Getting these people to go into their communities and find out and investigate what these things are. And then also, I think unfortunately, we've looked at anything that doesn't look in a certain way to us from an information perspective and from a what does the indigenous knowledge look like? If it doesn't look a certain way, then we've kind of like shoot it over maybe the last 300 years. Looking at that as valuable information, and then maybe spreading that as well to different parts of the world, and then including that on a message as well. It's like collecting these ideas about how we've done things in different places.
When I first told my daughter about this project, I think I mentioned that I think Sagan had one of his kids put his voice or her voice on. Was it Nick Sagan?
Nick Sagan, yeah.
And she loved that, and she was like, "Oh, Daddy, can you put me on the record? I want to be on the record."
Sure.
And the appeal to kids in education is obviously fantastic. So you have this, serving communities that maybe don't normally have these opportunities to get involved in science, which is wonderful. And then, of course, there are people, such as myself, I'd probably put myself in this bracket, who are just fascinated by this project and are interested in being involved. I wonder, because this project has to be funded and supported, and I know the project has been struggling a little bit to find the funding sometimes to keep it going.
Sure.
If there is an opportunity for, people buy like an acre on the moon sometimes. You ever seen this? Or they buy like a star or an asteroid, but it's all BS.
Sure.
Like, it's not real. But it'd be wonderful if you could make a donation to the Interstellar Foundation, $100 or something, and you could give that as a gift to somebody, and they get to like record a message that goes to the moon or goes to the stars one day. I think that would be
great segue. We're definitely looking at sort of this distributed idea of participation from that perspective as well. So we're probably going to be launching the Interstellar membership, where you become a member and you can also participate, because we actually do, there is a free membership if you don't want to or if you don't have the capacity to donate.
But people do want to support this.
Yeah, I think. Absolutely. Yeah. And we definitely do need the support in if we get enough support, there's the ability for us to build our own message. So again, with the Planetary Society, they looked at at $6 million to build a solar sail out there.
That's LightSail 2, is it?
I think LightSail 2, and that's we're far away from that. But the idea of having people participating from a membership perspective, and being part of it, I think we're going to add in the gift part as well, because it is a good.
Yeah, we've had it with people can donate to the Cool Worlds Lab. And often people have asked me, I want to give this as a gift to somebody else and for a way for them to be involved. So it just seems like it could empower you, take the money from the rich so that you can build it up, and then you can do more both in the educational world and actually also in space.
I think for us, the difficulty that we found with that is we can't allow. So we're quite the idea of making sure that we're sending something that is not harmful.
Yes. Okay. Maybe there needs to be some. Someone who's checking these messages.
We can't have people swearing at aliens and then send that into
but
space.
That's right, because people have done this with like planet naming, right? There was a campaign. You had a planet naming, and there were rules. You can't name it whatever you want. I think there was
Bodie McBoatface.
Right, and Bodie McBoatface went out, and I think people got really into that, and there were a lot. I mean, there was that kind of silly one that rose to the top, but there's also lots of really thoughtful, interesting. One word messages almost that were trying to be encapsulated there.
I think the next time we speak, I will let you know in terms of what that looks like from it, because it is something that we should be doing, but I think we can come up with a very fun and cool way to
And I tell you what, people who are watching this on the YouTube, they should let us know in the comments what they think. Like, is there a way you would like to be involved in this project that would be particularly appealing? Whatever, maybe I'm sure people have some great ideas out there. They always do. So we should curate some great ideas, and I'll pass them along to you. Yeah. This was a lot of fun, Nick. Hopefully everybody learned a lot about this exciting project. So if they want to learn more, where can they head to, just to give the links?
Interstellar Foundation across all social medias. Go to our website, join in terms of if you leave your email on our website, you will be invited to meetings that we have, and we generally host meetings last Thursday of every month. And then we have small group meetings as well. So if you're interested in a particular thing, if you are an engineer who thinks that he can explain how to build a laptop and open up a JPEG, or if you are a cultural anthropologist and you want to get into that part, or if you're a video editor, or if you're a human being,
you have something to offer.
You have something to offer. And it's not necessarily from the perspective of, I think one of the beauties of the project is getting people to feel like they're part of the story.
Yeah.
And I would love, somebody who's in a place that is far away in a rural area, who hasn't felt seen or felt heard, that they're able to participate and go, I'm part of the story of humans.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Nick.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And thanks a lot.
So that was my conversation with Nick Searra, Executive Director of the Interstellar Foundation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Certainly for me, and I hope it was true for you, these conversations really do force us to think very seriously about what it is that we want to say to other civilizations, the act of messaging extraterrestrial intelligences, METI. Not only the what, but also the how. I mean, will they even understand what a video message is? Maybe they don't have eyes, maybe they don't have ears. How do we communicate with another being that could be so radically different from us? And ultimately, for me, as I said in the podcast, I really do believe that the most likely recipients of this message will probably be descendants of maybe us or some other creature that lives on the earth that would retrieve these vehicles in the future. And that is an opportunity for a historical passing down of the torch, of saying something to that next generation, very, very far next generation, about who we were and what we represented and our beliefs. And perhaps nothing else would be left of us except for dust and that singular message. So for me, it's a very poignant and inspiring, profound thing to think about. I hope it was for you too. I would genuinely and very much, as always, love to hear your thoughts about this topic. I think this topic in particular really demands your input and your attention here. So please do let me know. You can, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can hit us down below in the comments. Do let us know, what do you think about the type of message that we should be sending out? Should we be sending out messages at all? What should be the format of these? How can we fund these efforts? Because let's face it, governments are not really interested in funding an Interstellar Foundation type project. And what it is that we really want to say, like who should speak for the Earth, as Carl Sagan once said. Those are the questions which I am certainly very interested to hear your thoughts about. So please do let us know down below. And if you enjoyed these conversations, the Cool Worlds podcast, please do, of course, check out our sponsor, Incogni. And the other thing you can do that would really help us out is to become a supporter to my research team, the Cool Worlds Lab. You can do that by using the link that I'll put down below in the description. It is coolworldslab.com/support. That is coolworldslab.com/support. You can head there, you become a donor, not really directly to the podcast or to the video channel, but really to the research team. So that money all goes to research. So if you are interested in supporting actual astrophysical research, astronomical research, looking for exomoons, looking for life in the universe, that's something to check out. And as a side product, as a byproduct, you will be supporting the podcast and the video as well, because the less time I have to spend working on proposals, grant applications, because I'm being supported by some of your help, the more time I have to make these podcasts and these videos. So that's the way that it's kind of two birds with one stone. So please do check that if you're interested. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.